Story number 1. This happened about 10 years ago, give or take. My buddy Craig and I had nothing going on the next day, so we decided to head over to our friend Eric's place. He had just started dating someone new, and the plan was to hang out for the night, have a few drinks, relax, and just unwind. Nothing serious. Eric was staying at his mom's apartment complex temporarily. Behind the building, there was a thick stretch of woods. Not just a few trees lining the property, this was a legitimate forest. Dense, shadowy, and it felt like it went on forever. This was upstate New York, and the weather was perfect. Cool, crisp fall air, colorful leaves underfoot, and just enough daylight left to make everything feel cozy. We cracked open a few beers and wandered into the woods behind the complex. It was just the three of us, Craig, Eric, and me, plus Eric's new girlfriend tagging along. We were laughing, joking around, just enjoying the quiet of the woods and the buzz from the beer. Eventually, the drinks ran dry. So we made a quick store run, grabbed more beer, and came right back. What we didn't really think through was how fast the light disappears this time of year. By the time we returned, the sun had dipped behind the trees. It wasn't pitch black yet, but the light had drained so fast, it was like someone had dimmed the world around us. We hadn't even started a fire yet, hadn't brought anything to get one going, actually. We found ourselves standing in a small clearing. It was a peaceful little spot where a couple of narrow trails split off in different directions. Quiet. Still. But something felt wrong. I couldn't put my finger on it, but the air had shifted. That calm, relaxed vibe we'd had earlier was gone. As we stood there laughing, I suddenly caught a glimpse of someone, just beyond the tree line. At first, I thought maybe it was a weirdly shaped tree or a trick of the shadows. But something about it felt off. Too solid. Too still. I nudged Craig. "Hey," I whispered, "do you see that?" At first, he squinted and said no. Then he froze. "Oh, wait, yeah. What the hell is that?" There was definitely someone there. A man. Massive. Just standing motionless among the trees. He wasn't close enough to make out his face, but he was close enough to tell that he wasn't wandering through. He wasn't lost or confused. He was watching us. He hadn't moved. Not even a twitch. Just stood there, partially hidden in the shadows. I tried to quietly get Eric's attention, careful not to alert whoever this was. But Eric, being Eric, was still in party mode, oblivious to anything serious. I whispered, "Dude, look ahead." Quietly. Instead, he turned, looked straight into the woods, and shouted, "Yo! Is that Bigfoot?" He laughed. Loudly. I tried to chuckle along, but my stomach twisted into knots. My instincts screamed that something wasn't right. We'd wandered too far into the woods to leave casually. Turning back now would be obvious. And the guy, whoever he was huge. Not like a bodybuilder, but just naturally big. Tall. Broad. Like he'd been carved out of the trees themselves. And there was something about how still he was. Just watching. No movement. No expression. Just still. We hesitantly said hello, trying not to sound nervous. And then Eric, man, this guy, he just walks right up to him. Starts talking to him like he's some long-lost friend or something. He says, "Dude, we thought you were an alien out here." Like, straight-up xenomorph with the second mouth and everything. Then he starts mimicking the creature from Alien, waving his hands around, hissing, making clicking noises. Total idiot behavior. Eric's girlfriend, who had been quiet most of the night, looked mortified. She didn't say much, but her body language screamed what we were all thinking. This wasn't funny. It was dangerous. Craig and I stood frozen, trying to figure out how the hell to de-escalate without freaking anyone out. We didn't want to run and make it obvious we were scared, but we also didn't want to stick around and find out what happened next. Then the guy finally speaks. "You guys drinking out here?" he asks. We kind of nod. Nothing more. He grins. "Cool. I got some stuff, too." Then he turns and walks over to the tree lean where he's got this beat-up old backpack leaning against a tree trunk. He reaches down and grabs a beer with one hand. But with his other hand, I catch something. He slips something into the front pocket of his hoodie. I couldn't see exactly what it was, but I got a real bad feeling. It was fast, smooth, practiced even. But it looked like a blade. Small. Concealed. He cracks open the beer and starts walking back toward us. I try to stay calm. My eyes slowly scan the woods around us, casual, not too obvious. And that's when I see it. Another person. Further back in the trees, almost hidden in the shadows. Moving. Creeping. Circling. It wasn't an animal. Not a deer. Not a raccoon. A person. Keeping low. Staying just out of sight. And that's when I knew we needed to leave. Immediately. I blurted out the first excuse I could think of. Man. I forgot I gotta be up early for work tomorrow. Craig was my ride. That was our way out. But Eric, being Eric, blurted out, "What? You told me you had the day off." I shot him a sharp look. "Dude. Help me out." Then I added, "Nah, man. You misheard. I definitely gotta be up early." Eric shrugged, completely oblivious. "Alright, later, guys. Drive safe." Like this wasn't a potentially dangerous situation or anything. Craig and I turned and started walking. Not too fast. Not running. Just, steady. Calm. As soon as we were far enough away, I leaned over and told him about the second person I'd seen, how they were creeping through the woods behind us. His face went pale. We knew we couldn't leave Eric and his girlfriend behind. So we came up with a plan. Craig pulled out his phone and called Eric. "Dude," he said, "your mom's outside in the parking lot looking for you, and she's pissed." Now, Eric might not be scared of strangers lurking in the woods. But he is scared of his mom. It worked. He grumbled, swore under his breath, but finally said, all right. We're coming." He and his girlfriend left the woods not long after. I don't think she minded getting pulled out of there. In fact, she looked relieved. To this day, I have no idea what we walked into. Some people say it was just a homeless guy and his buddy, hanging out in the woods, maybe looking for a place to crash for the night. Others think it was a drug deal, something shady we stumbled into. Me? I don't know. But whatever it was, we weren't supposed to be there. And I've never gone back to those woods since. Story number 2. This happened maybe 4 or 5 years ago, back when I was still living with my mom on a quiet little farm surrounded by dense woods. We lived out in the sticks, but we weren't completely isolated. There were other farms scattered around, just not exactly next door. Each neighbor was at least half a kilometer away, so we had a good mix of privacy and safety. That balance made me feel secure. Probably too secure, looking back. I used to go on walks at night like it was nothing. Sometimes around 7 or 8 p.m. And on nights I couldn't sleep, I'd be out wandering the back road at 2 in the morning. Looking back now, yeah. That was dumb. I had a loop I stuck to. Walked it pretty religiously. The first half was easy, open space that ran along the front of all the farms, including ours. There were lights in the distance. A few windows glowing. If anything went sideways, someone might see me. Or at the very least, I had enough cell signal to call for help. But the second half of the loop, that was different. That stretch cut behind the farms. 2 kilometers of narrow trail through thick woods, about 200 meters deep, flanked by rustling trees and pitch-black shadows. It always gave me the creeps, but I told myself it was fine. Until that one night. I can't remember the exact time, but it was late. Really late. The sky was black. No moon. Just my flashlight beam bouncing off tree trunks as I walked. I was almost through the woods, right at the bend where the trail curves back into open land, when I heard it. A voice. Just one word. Flat. Emotionless. Almost robotic. Help. I stopped walking. Pulled out my headphones. Killed the music. Stood there, completely still. And there it was again. Help. Help. Same word. Same tone. No urgency. No panic. Just monotone. Like someone pressing play on a recording. Over and over. I should have turned around right then. But for some reason, my first instinct wasn't fear. It was concern. My brain hadn't caught up to the danger yet. I was only 16, maybe 17. That naive part of me wanted to believe someone really needed help. That I could do something. Be the hero. So I took a step forward. But something about the way the voice repeated, identical, mechanical, too perfect, made my stomach twist. That's when my instincts finally kicked in. And my brain screamed one word loud and clear. No. This is how people go missing on true crime podcasts. That's the exact thought that shot through my mind as I started slowly backing away. And then it got worse. My cat had followed me on the walk, like she usually did. A weird little habit of hers, tagging along quietly like some furry, four-legged bodyguard. But instead of retreating with me, she began creeping toward the sound. Her ears were pinned back. Her belly was low to the ground. She was hissing softly, not loud, just this steady, warning hiss. I crouched down a bit and started whispering her name. Calling to her gently, coaxing her back, doing everything I could to keep from making noise. But she wouldn't move. She just stood there, locked in, like something had her attention, something I couldn't see. And I was stuck. I didn't want to leave her behind. But I also didn't want to stand there playing tug-of-war with a cat while some unknown person, or thing, was lurking in the trees. Finally, I made a decision. I sprinted forward, scooped her up into my arms, spun around, and ran. Full-on sprint. Heart pounding. Cat clutched to my chest. And yeah. I realized turning my back on whatever was out there might not have been the smartest idea. But I was panicking. Every horror movie cliché was screaming in my head. I half expected to feel a hand grab my shoulder at any second. I didn't hear footsteps behind me. No voices. No cracking branches. But that didn't make me feel any better. I didn't stop running until I was back at the house. Door slammed shut. Locked. My cat still squirming in my arms. And even then, I couldn't shake the voice from my head. That flat, emotionless cry for help. What if someone really needed help? What if I just ran away like a coward while someone lay dying in the woods? So, I told my mom everything. Every detail. And somehow, I convinced her to drive me back out to the trail. Looking back, it feels insane. But at the time, I couldn't let it go. We stayed in the car and rolled the windows down. Called out into the woods. Asked if anyone was there. If anyone needed help. But there was nothing. No movement. No reply. No sound at all. just stillness. Thick, suffocating silence. We didn't get out of the car, thank God. After a few minutes of eerie quiet, we turned around and drove home. But that night, I didn't sleep. And the next morning, that sick, gnawing feeling still hadn't gone away. So, once again, I asked her to drive me back. This time, we actually got out and walked the area. Just in the immediate space near the trail, I couldn't go too deep. I was too shaken. I don't know what I expected to find. Maybe a sign. A clue. Something. Part of me was terrified we were going to find a body. I know how dramatic that sounds. But the voice, it didn't sound drunk. Or like a prank. It didn't sound like someone playing around. It sounded wrong. Like someone who was in shock. Or completely detached from whatever horror they were living through. But we didn't find anything. No footprints. No broken branches. No objects. No person. Nothing at all. To this day, I still have no idea what I heard that night. No face to go with the voice. No answers. No closure. Just a memory that creeps into my head at random, cold and unexplained. Maybe it was someone playing a sick joke. Or maybe I dodged something way worse than I'll ever truly understand. Story number 3. Who knows? This happened a few years ago on one of those perfect summer afternoons. You know the kind, not too hot, sun shining bright, and everything just feels peaceful. I was driving home from my friend's place, taking the scenic route, when I passed a tiny park tucked off the side of a quiet road. I'd heard it had some hiking trails leading to these insane cliff views over a valley and forest. I'd only ever seen pictures online, but they looked incredible, like something straight off a postcard. Since I had some time to kill, and the weather was too nice to waste, I figured, why not check it out? When I pulled into the parking lot, it was completely empty. Honestly, I liked that. It meant I'd probably have the trail to myself. I parked, glanced at the map by the entrance, and picked the path that looked the least intimidating. It was wide and mostly flat, with just a few small hills and some rocks to hop over. The trail was pretty open. Not too much brush, no confusing twists or turns. Basically, the perfect little hike for someone wanting to relax. About halfway through, I crested a small hill that led down into an open clearing. At the bottom, I noticed an older man sitting alone on some rocks. He looked like someone's sweet grandpa, white hair, kind face, just sitting there, staring out into the trees. When I got closer, he smiled and asked, "Where are you heading?" I told him I was just trying to find the cliffs everyone talks about. At first, he seemed friendly. But his expression shifted pretty fast. "You should be careful," he said, still smiling, but there was something off about it. I figured maybe he was just a concerned adult. I mean, I was barely 5 feet tall back then and looked like a teenager. So, maybe he thought I wasn't ready for a cliff hike. I thanked him politely and started to walk past. But then he spoke again. Same words, but a totally different tone. "No, you really need to be careful." He was staring now. Eyes locked on mine. His voice completely flat. Trying to ease the tension, I told him I'd hiked a lot before and knew what I was doing. Then he said something that made my stomach turn. "A lot of teenagers come out here to see the cliffs." He paused. "Lots of them never make it back." His voice dropped lower, almost like someone was pushing the words out of him. I wanted to believe he was joking, just a weird old man with a dark sense of humor. But there was nothing funny about the way he looked at me. His eyes were cold. The way he said it didn't sound like a warning. It sounded like a threat. I tried to brush it off, chalking it up to my paranoia, which I definitely have, especially in the woods. I thanked him again, turned, and kept walking. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. I barely made it a few steps before a deep sense of dread took over. I stopped, turned back to look toward the clearing. And he was gone. Completely vanished. I didn't hear him walk away. There was nowhere for him to go without being seen. The path ahead was wide open. The brush was too thin to hide in. Now, I was officially creeped out. I practically jogged back the way I came, ears tuned for every little sound around me. When I reached the parking lot, still completely empty, I realized something weird. If no one else was here when I arrived, then where did that man come from? And where the hell did he go? I got in my car, locked the doors immediately, and drove out of there as fast as I could. Nothing ever came of it. No tires slashed. No strange faces in my rearview mirror. I never saw that man again. But the whole thing haunted me. I never went back to see those cliffs, which is a shame because I still think about that view. But honestly, I just couldn't shake how he looked at me. Or how his voice sounded when he said that last line. Was he just a weird, overly cautious old guy? Maybe. Maybe he was trying to save me from something I didn't even know was out there. Or maybe he was the one I needed saving from. Story number 4. I'll probably never know what exactly went on there. A while back, I worked a contract gig with a team for the U.S. Forest Service. We were basically plant detectives, trekking through remote wilderness in Southern California. Our job was to hunt down invasive species, map them out with GPS, and pull them up when needed. Because we worked under official contracts, we had access to some seriously remote spots, places the general public wasn't allowed to enter. And trust me, the deeper you go into those woods, the stranger the things you stumble across. I have more than a few creepy stories from those trips, but one has always stuck with me. At the start of my job, we'd pass by this rundown day-use area every single day. It looked like something straight out of a horror movie, overgrown, abandoned, and littered with random junk. The driveway was blocked off with a heavy metal gate, but people kept driving over the curb and going in like it was no big deal. Some folks had dogs with them, some took pictures, but a few just parked, carried stuff into the woods, and never came back while we were around. My boss always told us to skip that spot. No invasive plants were ever tracked there, so we left it alone for a while. Then, after months of working elsewhere, we got called back to that same stretch of forest. One day, we were assigned to cover a long, narrow canyon road, about 7 miles in total. That creepy old day-use area was right off that road. I volunteered to cover that side with 2 coworkers. We figured, maybe we'd finally check out that sketchy place. We had our usual gear, hose, saws, Pulaskis, and I carried a cookery knife on my belt, just in case. Fieldwork isn't always peaceful. The moment we stepped into that area, we saw it was a complete mess. Abandoned appliances lay scattered everywhere. Shattered glass glittered on the ground. Rusty metal shelves looked like they'd been there for years, forgotten. But the strangest thing? Perfect square holes, a few feet wide and deep, cut into the concrete floor. I had no idea what they were for. Then, we came across a large dirt mound covered in stones. Next to it were stained rags, dark, dried, and suspicious. Half a skateboard stuck out of the mound's top, and nearby stood a rough wooden cross. On the skateboard, something was scribbled, maybe a diamond shape or a name, but the dates were too faded to read. One of my coworkers thought it was just a pet grave. But I couldn't shake the image of those blood-stained rags. We were logging plant data when we found a hidden corner of the area that suddenly opened into an entirely new canyon. The satellite map confirmed it was a legitimate canyon we hadn't explored yet, so we took note of it. Nearby, there was a small building, about the size of half a shipping container. The door was cracked open. I poked it wider with my hoe, peering inside. Pitch black. My coworker pulled out his phone and shined a light into the darkness. What we saw made my blood run cold. Pornographic magazines scattered everywhere. Children's clothing. Some bedding, too. I didn't wait to process it. I just turned and started walking straight back toward the road. As I got closer to the clearing, I noticed a pickup truck that definitely hadn't been there when we first walked in. It had driven around the gate and was parked way off in a secluded corner. No one was inside or nearby. I stood there awkwardly, waiting for my coworkers to catch up. When they did, I pointed out the truck. One of them said the driver was probably hanging out in the old bathroom building off the road. I didn't love the idea of going near it. But I wasn't about to stand alone either, so I followed them. The building was shaped like a V, men's and women's bathrooms on either side, with a storage room in the middle. My buddies went into the men's side, which already looked like it had been busted into at some point. Inside was the same disturbing scene, more adult magazines, children's clothing, and bedding. But here's where it got worse. There was a hole cut into the bathroom wall, leading into the storage room. One of my coworkers poked his head through to peek inside. Suddenly, I was standing outside when I heard the storage room door knob start rattling violently. Then, my coworkers began yelling. One grabbed his Pulaski and slammed it repeatedly into the door handle. Seconds later, a man bolted out of the bathroom and took off deeper into the day-use area, right back toward the building we had just checked. My coworker had shined his light inside the storage room and saw the man crouched in the corner of the dark room. The place was packed with boxes, kids' clothes, and bedding. We didn't wait around. We radioed a nearby fire crew for backup. A few of the hot shots arrived, and they weren't messing around. They brought a chainsaw, ripped the door open, and set up powerful lights. What they found inside was deeply disturbing. Stacks of child pornography magazines. More children's clothing. Blankets everywhere. We told them where the man had run. They followed the trail to a little building in the back. What they discovered shocked us all. The structure wasn't just a shack, it extended back into the hillside. A hidden bunker. And that was where the investigation stopped for us. No one wanted to step a single foot further in there. Story number 5. Back in 2007, I was working on my PhD at the University of Florida. I lived alone in a small condo I owned in Gainesville. Around that time, one of my friends, let's call him Captain, was on this wild mission to walk across the country. He decided to take a break from his journey and crash at my place for the winter. I wasn't home all that much since I spent most nights at my boyfriend's house. But having someone basically live rent-free in my space for months started to wear on me. So when spring rolled around and Captain asked if I could drive him back to the exact spot in Alabama where he had left off, I said, yeah, sure. Let's get you walking again. The drive out wasn't bad, probably around 5 or 6 hours. I dropped him off in the early evening, then turned right around to head back to Gainesville. That's when things got weird. Instead of taking me back the same way I came, my GPS suggested this faster backroad route through rural Alabama. And I mean deep backwoods. Barely any lights, tiny roads, and that classic middle-of-nowhere vibe. It was already late, and now I was winding through dark country roads I'd never seen before. Definitely had that deliverance energy. At some point, I noticed a car had gotten behind me. No big deal at first, maybe they were just on the same oddball route the GPS gave me. But after a while, it stuck with me through every turn. Even after I accidentally missed my original left turn and took the next one instead, the car mirrored every move. That's when it really hit me, I wasn't just being followed by chance. Someone was tailing me on purpose. I called my boyfriend to help me find the local non-emergency police number. Of course, he thought I was being dramatic. He was distracted with something and basically brushed me off. That made me even more frustrated. I didn't want to call 911 unless I was sure something was actually going down. But looking back now, I should have done it anyway. The situation kept escalating. I was dangerously low on gas, and there hadn't been a station for miles. So not only was I being followed, I was going to have to stop the car alone in the middle of nowhere. The worst part? I couldn't even get a good look at the driver. The windows were tinted dark, and the roads were pitch black. I kept thinking maybe it was some weird local rivalry thing, like maybe they saw my UF Gator license plate and were an Auburn or Alabama fan just messing around. But even that didn't make sense. This was way too intense to be a harmless prank. Whether they knew I was a woman or not, the way they were sticking with me felt calculated, and honestly, a little sinister. Eventually, I made it into a town big enough to have street lights and open businesses, and I felt just a little safer. At the next red light, I decided to send a message to the driver, that I knew what was going on. I turned all the way around in my seat, stared straight at them, and pretended I was on the phone giving their description. I held eye contact the entire time the light was red, hoping it would spook them. Soon after, I found a well-lit gas station and pulled in, parking my driver's side right next to the store entrance. I ran inside and told the cashier someone had been following me for over an hour. He came around the counter, looked out the window, and said there was no one out there. I could have sworn the car was right behind me, but I guess seeing me bolt inside made them ditch the scene. Either way, it was chilling. The guy had stuck with me for almost 100 miles. That's not random. That's stalking. I never found out who it was or what they wanted, but the whole thing left me on edge for weeks. After filling up, the cashier pointed me back to the freeway, and thankfully, the rest of the trip was uneventful. But I'll tell you this. I was still shaking by the time I got home, and furious that my boyfriend hadn't taken it seriously. Story number 6. This happened not too long ago. I work in child care, and one of the kids I look after had recently developed a pretty big obsession with hiking. He kept talking about caves, trails, and all that stuff. So, one day, I figured I'd take him to this really cool trail I'd been to before in Salt Fork State Park. There's this spot called Hozak's Cave. It's not really a cave, more like a big rock overhang with a little waterfall trickling down. Super pretty and wide open. The trail to get there is only about half a mile, and it used to be pretty well traveled. That's why I picked it, short and safe. Now, here's the thing. A bunch of summer storms had hit the area recently, and I didn't realize just how much damage they'd done to the trail until we got there. What used to be a nice wide path was now more like a skinny ledge, barely a foot wide in some places, with a good 6-foot drop down into a rocky creek bed. Not exactly ideal, but there was a small crew doing some bridge work not too far from the tailhead, so I felt okay enough to go on. Plus, the kid was all amped up and totally ready to tackle it, so we just went for it. We made it all the way to this viewing platform near the cave, but it was roped off with some signs saying it was closed, probably because of the fallen trees everywhere. Still, we were already there, and the cave was just a bit farther, so we carefully made our way around it and climbed down through some tree roots. We ended up hanging out at the cave for a while, mostly because it was kind of tricky to get to, and the kid was having the best time ever. He found this little puddle full of baby salamanders and was just so into it. I honestly hadn't seen him that happy in forever. So, I let him play and catch them for almost an hour. Now, while we were up there, I did notice a few weird things. There was an old candle sitting on a rock with a heart carved into it. Definitely had a vibe, but I assumed it was from some couple trying to make it romantic. Higher up near the edge, we spotted 2 more candles and a few stacks of rocks that looked deliberately placed. I was starting to feel a little unsettled at that point but didn't say anything. I just kept an eye out, you know. Eventually, we decided to head back. And here's where things got really weird. When we climbed back to that same platform area, remember, the one with the tree roots? We both noticed this soaked washcloth just hanging right there, right in the middle of the path. That thing was not there before. I know that for a fact. The kid saw it, too, but he didn't pick up on how strange it was. I, on the other hand, felt my stomach twist. In that moment, two things were immediately clear. 1, someone else was out there watching us. 2, whoever it was had managed to sneak close enough to leave that washcloth without ever being seen. That trail was narrow with no real way to double back or loop around. There was no place to run if something went wrong. And I wasn't about to freak the kid out. So, I told him to lead the way back and just kept encouraging him over and over, telling him how great he was doing, just trying to keep things moving. We never saw anyone on the trail. But once we got to the car, I locked the doors right away. And just as we were leaving the park, I saw this man step out from the woods, not far from the road. He looked like he hadn't showered in weeks, probably mid-30s, and he just stared at me with this deep, soul-piercing eye contact. His face was totally blank, no expression, just following me with his head and eyes as we drove by. That's when I knew this guy wanted me to see him, like he was confirming everything I had already feared. That stare haunted me for days. I couldn't shake it. Part of me tried to rationalize it. Maybe he was camping and didn't want to startle us. Maybe we just caught him off guard. But the truth is, he had plenty of time to do whatever he wanted while we were distracted catching salamanders. And the fact that he left that washcloth behind after sneaking close enough to place it, that felt deliberate, like he wanted me to know we weren't alone. The kid had no idea anything weird happened. To this day, he still talks about that hike like it was the best day ever. Meanwhile, I was barely holding it together the whole time. Honestly, it was one of the most disturbing experiences I've ever had. And I still get chills thinking about that stare.